Director of Systems Engineering Nordic at Citrix. And this is all going to be about employee experience and the 5 technology enablers that make that happen. And Peter is responsible for Citrix Nordic's team of systems engineers, and he has extensive experience in introducing Citrix solutions into the largest companies in Sweden and the Nordics in both large and small environments. And he has a background in technology, but he's also previously taken on roles in both support functions and technical sales support. It's really great to have you here in the studio with us. We're really great to have the support of Citrix for this event. And what has been some of the, if you do have a takeaway from the session before, was there something you took away from the sustainability session that really hit the button for you?
Oh, it's a new thing, the whole thing about sustainability, I think from the IT business. We've been focused so much around security and other type of challenges. So I'm welcoming the challenge because I think we can contribute to a better sustainable work style. And I'll talk a little bit about this in my presentation.
Right. Well, I'm really excited to hear about these technology enablers. So the stage is yours.
Thank you.
Take your place.
Thank you very much. All right. So in working for Citrix, I have been helping customers for more than 20 years enabling remote working. And by doing this, enabling application and data to be delivered wider than just the desk at the office, whether it's working from home or making application and data more mobile. And in recent years, enabling a flexible and agile work style. However, it's very often been considered an alternative way of working or an optional way of working, often with a different and sometimes limited user experience. Now, with Citrix, we can change this perception. And in fact, this notion where people have invested in Citrix for many years has been called differently and been very tactical, where people have used a specific solution to solve a certain problem. And I've been fortunate to work for Citrix in this space because we have been innovating for these solutions for many years. We've innovated in virtual computing, making mobile applications more available, or various different remote access solutions. And in recent time, we've also been focusing on a wider problem of really creating what we would like to call a digital workspace that can enable people to more productive and flexible work style. Now, so essentially, the conversation is around the better way of working. And I've seen it earlier on the sessions today. People have made reference to a number of different business leaders and organizations who have to rethink what the business would look like going forward, mainly due to this pandemic situation. I too made a few comments or made a few of those anecdotes. I was just finding them online the other week. And it's interesting because while these solutions that we have been working with haven't really been considered the main way of working, it's always been an option. Nowadays, maybe going forward, and we heard this also from the panel conversation, this maybe will be the main way of working. So this was Barclays CEO was out saying squeezing 7,000 people into a building might not, be the way of the future. Twitter was out and also talked about this, the fact that they might have employees who never comes back to the office. So of course, this is going to change the requirements and the expectation of the business on how IT can meet the business. And if we then look at, and we can play a little bit with words here as well, which is the workplace versus the workspace. But a traditional workplace is referring to a physical location, often the office, right? And if you look at the IT workplace, it's very often a single device. It is location specific, or at least it functions differently depending on where the location is, often easier and better on the inside of the network, and have a different user experience when you're outside of the network. It's always often business owned, and there's a level of manual activities and requirements and a reactive approach to how to manage, control, and support those IT environments. They are often connected to a single device, the laptop in the office when you start your work the first day at your office. A very different user experience is what's happening in the modern world in the consumer space. And when we talk about the modern workspace, we like to look at it as something that comes to me as a person. And this is an interesting concept because in the conversation I have with a lot of these organizations, I've really seen the power when work is no longer a place, but actually something you do. And you can choose when, where, and how to get that work done. So in the notion of a modern workspace, this should be across multiple devices. We heard Dr. Rosener earlier refer to these challenges when we start bringing in a different type of devices into the mix, and I'll talk about this in just a second. The modern workspace is also something that should really be working anywhere, not just from home occasionally, but built into the delivery. When IT thinks about how to deliver this to the business, it should be a truly anywhere perspective. It should be a combination of user-owned and business-owned, because what we see going forward is that lockdown laptop that used to be the way to deliver IT is no longer cutting it in an environment where the business might have franchising partners, suppliers, they might do merger acquisitions and so forth, that they need to get rid of just having to own all the devices in the environment. There needs to be some level of automation and proactiveness, and very much like the consumer space, where if you need an application, you go to the App Store, you search for it, you find it, you download it, and you use it. Very similar to everyone who has kids knows how quickly they can get new application. There's no manual needed. There's no installation and management. The only thing I still have is the approval button, right? So I made sure that I have to approve them before, but I don't need to do anything more. And that's the characteristics of what we believe should be a modern workspace. Now, onto and I wouldn't say these are small things. The 5 technology enablers, if you like, for not only a great remote working experience, but in general, a great working experience. Interestingly enough is also that I think that some of those technologies have to be and can be influenced not only by IT, but maybe the marketing folks or people in HR or in the business, because it's challenging many of the status quos that has been done within IT for many, many years. And the first one, I already touched on it, is, for example, the notion of what used to be the device-based approach and talk about a people-based approach. A people-based approach when it comes to IT means that IT doesn't come to a lockdown laptop that I have to carry with me. It comes to me as a person. And I can then choose when, where, and how to get work done. It also needs to have the truly anywhere concept, not just, as we said, working from home. That might be okay because I have a reasonably strong network in this part of the world. But for organizations that are operating on a global scale with partners and suppliers in different continents, they should also have the same experience, the same ability to use and work as it is if you're in an office. And this cannot be an aftermath. I'll get to it in the later, but we used to be called a remote access solution. And I think we just should remove the remote in itself and just talk about how IT can hit the business where it needs to be. Not forcing people into an office just because IT requires so. We believe that, and of course Citrix, and I will talk about our own offering around this workspace, but I think regardless of what vendor you choose, you need to create a common, simple to use, secure place where people would go and then get work done. And they should not be connected to any specific device, but it should be a combined workspace, which is easy to find, and with a single click, you can get into the work that you need to do. We should take inspiration from the consumer-like experience that I mentioned before. And I'll talk about this in a second, but the way applications looks in the business world is very different to what it looks in the consumer world. And here there's a lot of work to be done, and also some of the challenges and why things are, I'll talk to in just a second. And finally, I think that we should have some kind of intelligently personalization around using the machine learning and using the artificial intelligence capabilities that exist today to make that workspace more intelligent, to based on your user profile, persona, location, and type of work, that should then be presented to you by the workspace instead of you having to search and find the information. So let's talk about that first notion. When I talk about device-based approach, nothing wrong with Dell. I just took a picture online to symbolize this. But essentially, this is what IT think about when they need to deliver IT to the business. We're getting into the laptop, right? And when we do, and because it's a portal one, because we think that is great, then people can move around and be productive. Here are some challenges with this is that if there's only one or two applications, it would be reasonably easy. But the problem is that most organizations, if they haven't been around 1 or 2 years, maybe they've done a lot more of the simplistic view about application and where to store data. But most organizations don't have the luxury. They have what I used to call the archaeological dig out, the Excel spreadsheet of hundreds of applications, the Windows app, the web app, the mobile app, and so forth. And how do I package this in a secure and easy way to deliver to the business? Well, for the most part, it has been that laptop. And when you do, and you have a lot of information on there, you need to make sure it's updated, you need to make sure it's secure, and that comes then the antivirus, the personal firewall, and so forth. This is limiting for people to be more agile and flexible. And the pandemic have proven this in a good way because we heard stories about people sending and shipping laptops all over the place because people can no longer get to work. IT should be delivered to me as a person. And if you have had this built in from the start, there hasn't been a really big difference for the way IT operates in this situation. IT will just be delivered for the device that I'm choosing. And that's the whole different perspective in terms of how IT should be delivered. And again, sometimes the business has to put challenge on IT to solve. The other thing is around, and I heard Dr. Rosener mention this VPN in an earlier session, and while VPN and virtual private network, to me, that's a bit of an invention back in the 90s. And when it was invented, it was because most of the application, the data, the devices, the people were inside the office, and we put a red internet firewall around everything. So inside it was okay, and everything outside was the bad stuff. And then we had a few guys sometimes that needed to have access externally. And that's how we created the VPN, which is a virtual private secure network that connects the laptop as part of the network. Some of the challenges here is that this is now part of that security parameter. It's part of that security, meaning that a lot of the attacks that are happening today is not on the firewall, on the office in itself. It's on those devices that have access to it. And then via that device, who are then maybe a bit more exposed, especially nowadays when people have to rush off to devices they might not use normally. This is exposing the company's information to exposure, which sometimes can lead to really drastic issues. And not only is the users going forward after this pandemic more outside the office than inside, also the applications have moved outside, right? So we have all these SaaS services, we have cloud storage, we have OneDrive, we have Google Drive, we have all sorts of containers that involves data that is now outside of the firewall. And no longer does the inside-outside the firewall concept work anymore. We have to build in that secure delivery in the way the mechanism needs to deliver, the platform needs to be delivered to me as a person. Again, a challenge that sometimes other people outside of IT has to make, because this is the way people have designed networks for 15 years. Right? So essentially, how do we put a firewall around the internet? Well, that's not so easy. So we have to have a new mindset in terms of how to deliver IT to business. And of course, it's looking back to this more traditional maybe not as bad as this if you compare to your own environment, but it is traditional workplace, which is that location which has the notion of a laptop on the desk and that's where you work. That perception needs to change. We need to have that anyness, the anywhereness, and the consumer mindset, so that when IT think what they need to deliver to the business, they should look more like this, right? Whatever it is, you might not work full day on a phone, but certain tasks can be probably quickly being done on a phone instead of starting a very complex application. And here's one of the reasons why we end up in this situation. I wouldn't say, the VPN in itself is the issue. A big part of this is that archaeological dig out that I talked about before, the Excel spreadsheet with all the applications. Enterprise applications have been competing versus other type of applications by adding functionality. I used to say it's like the Xerox problem. So if you go into a copy machine, for the most part, want to make a copy. But on that machine, and this is a Xerox, but it could be any, most of them look like this, ours does as well, has hundreds of features. I can do A3 to A4 double-sided, I can clamp them, I can do color, whatever it is. There's a lot of capabilities in there that is presented to me, but essentially 99 times out of 10 in a copy machine is actually making a copy. It's the green button I hit, off I go. And this is a similar way when it comes to enterprise application. There's a lot of functionality in all these applications that I'm very rarely using, but it's cluttering the user experience and sometimes causing errors or time-consuming tasks yet to get simple tasks done. Let's take a marketing director, Anastasia. She works at a company. She's whether she end up in the office or whether she's start working from home, she maybe been ordering some food, some groceries from the mobile app to be delivered in the afternoon. She type in a few things. She have a few of them pre-selected, milk and yogurt and so forth. And then she select the time when it's going to get delivered, right? That's a reasonably complex task. It has to have location, pavement, it has to be secure and all that stuff. It's all handled with a few clicks and off she go. Then she gets into her office environment and that looks very different. That maybe looks either as a portal from the 90s or a whole bunch of disconnected applications on the desktop. Right? No wonder you end up in the inbox or Facebook, because that's really where there's some action going on, and try to kind of understand what I need to do. And not only that, after 20 minutes of working, it often looks a little bit like this. Right? You have a lot of these applications, a lot of these functionality to be started. And after a while, you're spending quite a lot of time application switching and searching for information and clicking around, which actually is not good for your concentration and lowering your productivity for many cases. There have been some recent studies about this. I don't need to go into the numbers, but I've seen one study that was mentioning about 20% of our time was actually spent as an office worker, spent on searching, content switching, logging in and getting to the application compared to the actual work, which is sometimes reasonably simple and mundane. So we believe there is a better way to solve this, right? And kind of take a step back and go back to those couple of points I mentioned earlier. I think is one of the key one there is to bring back the person, Anastasia, in focus and say, okay, when we need to deliver IT, we need to put the person in the middle, right? Then we need to figure out the way so that all this Excel spreadsheet, the archaeological dig out stuff, can be combined, presented, controlled, managed, and supported, not only on that Dell laptop, but on any location, at any device, and build this into that application delivery. Again, whether you use Citrix or use another delivery mechanism, this is a fundamental change in how many of these organizations today are looking at it. And only then we can provide an enlightened environment that makes Anastasia more productive and effective. However, as I talked before, and this is one of the strengths that we have been asked to, in many cases, is to deal with this security concern. Because while the consumer space might not have the same compliancy and security requirements, certainly business does. And here, for example, and again, it was mentioned in the earlier sessions, when we start exposing application and data on unmanaged devices, devices that people have no control over, we have to think differently than at the level where we created it, right? So there needs to be a mechanism to make sure that this is done in a secure fashion. So let's say Anastasia is from home on a MacBook, which is not part of the network, and it is what it is. It's not updated, it's old, or whatever it is. We can then easily provide application data, or the solution needs to provide those systems, but without actually running them or making them exist on the actual Apple device, in this case, the MacBook. We can take away, cut and paste, save locally, print, and sometimes we can also remove certain applications. If you're a finance and banker, there might be some applications you cannot do when you're from home. You can only do it when you put your ID card through the reception and go through the gate, because a large money transfer cannot be done from home with a guy with a vest and a shotgun behind you telling you to do so. Right. So this is contextual access that needs to be built into the application delivery, not left at the user to make those decisions. The user should just click and get work done. So this balance to make this available on all these devices, at the same time secure them even though they exist in the cloud, at a partner hosting facility, or in your own data center. And not only that, there's an additional dimension to this, and that's the constant change, the choices that we have to make. So this solution needs to be able to provide this sort of capability also in a changing world. IT cannot lock down and say, running Windows 10 for the next 2 years because that makes it easy for us to manage. Well, you're a small part of the business, so get your priorities straight, right? We have to have a solution that enables, and the pandemic obviously has been a great impact on this notion that things can change and we quickly have to think differently. So different type of application, different type of users, whether it's outsourcing or insourcing. Should we develop it ourselves, or should we buy this? And where can it go? And those, again, are some of the challenges of the status quo in terms of the architecture of IT to deliver. So we like to think about this as experience plus security plus choice, not the or. Because it's normally like a slider where either something is really secure and really easy. In fact, I've been working with some of the more high security companies or organizations in the government, for example. They really talk about high security. They talk about enough security for what they need to protect, because they know that if they create a super duper security solution, it will be so unuseful that people will, like water, find other ways to work around it, and there's nothing being solved. And a company who does this really well is a company called Saab. Saab is a defense supplier in Sweden. They're famous for their fighter jets and some of the other military equipment, which from an IT perspective is a great challenge because their security requirements is very, very high. At the same time, they do business on an international, very competitive market. And when they sell their products, like airplanes to Switzerland, Brazil, or in US recently, they essentially produce a new business connecting with a number of sub-suppliers in another country, which they have little control over the network, the devices, the applications, or the people. And in this case, I think they've done really well that with a digital workspace, they can deliver a complete IT environment in a secure way 2 days after contract signing. Meaning if they sign up for a company with this sort of solution, they can provide that secure environment. And they can do it cross-continent, right? So they have this remote working with great experience and security kind of built into the delivery. And this is a sort of benefit that you then would get. All right. So what are the things that we need to do to get this working? Well, we believe that also the way IT has been structured can sometimes come in the way here. We believe that there need to be some kind of workspace concept where the networking interacts with the workspace, and also that there need to be some other type of monitoring and analytics. Because one of the things that we're now saying yes to, meaning bring your own devices or work from home or unmanaged devices in general, changes the game in terms of how analytics and monitoring can take place. And I'll get into this in more detail just a second. So from Citrix, what we've done, and we call it the Citrix Workspace, is essentially that you can compare it to Netflix, right? It's an app you download, and you can see all the movies. And if you stop watching a movie because you need to move, you can log in on another device. And if you're logged in with the same account, you can then continue watch the movie somewhere else. It works exactly the same. And sometimes you have, if the device is secure and you need it for whatever reason, an offline solution, you can download a document and you can get it. But for the most part, it works exactly the same way, even though it's actually not physically located on the device. And you get the benefit of that Netflix situation, nothing on the device, but still a great user experience. In fact, I'll show this in a short demo in just a second. And this workspace has a number of characteristics that I talked about, right? One of them, and the most important one, I think, is that it's a consistent, branded user interface that is familiar to me, regardless if I log in from a web browser, from a mobile device, from a tablet, or from my MacBook. I have the same look and feel, the same type of application, the same access to documents, regardless of where they exist. And I have single sign-on, meaning that authentication and the username and password, and we all know that's a weak point. We will enforce a strong authentication of your choosing, the 3 factors you can, something you know, have, and you are. And once you have that, we can then provide you single sign-on to the other applications to provide a high threshold to start with and then deliver you a single sign-on solution. We're also going to provide you with a universal search so that in the workspace should have where you can search for something. You shouldn't have to know what that application is installed and how it functions. You should just go and search for it and get good answers. And that contextual security and performance is also something that is interesting because so far applications have gone where the user are because there's a tight connection between the device and the user. And with this sort of solution, we can move the application to where it's preferable from a performance point of view, because it's really close to the database and it works really fast. Or maybe move everything to the cloud because of sustainability. There's Azure have better COU numbers than my own data center. We can move that to the Azure data center of our choosing, but we don't have to move the users there. And the same thing goes from security. I can provide application and data into environments like Saab is doing without the actual document getting left once the user have been using it. Very similar to the 9 o'clock news doesn't exist in your television when you turn it off. And you can't really break the 9 o'clock news by smashing the TV, right? So with this sort of solution and the contextual access enables you to continue to work uninterrupted. And if there's any security concerns, we will then, the system in itself will detect this and remove the capabilities. For example, printing, if printing should not be allowed, and so on. So in sense, we will take all these disconnected applications and we will also take the documents, move that into a consistent, secure, unified workspace, make sure it works on every device. And then we will apply a number of capabilities that I think would be needed to put that great user experience. And the first thing is taking that influence from Facebook when it comes to feeds, which is short snippets of information that we believe the machine learning, the AI, would think that you, based on your profile, your use pattern, and so forth, would appreciate, so that you can quickly get updated on those. We also have notifications. If the grocery that Anastasia was ordering coming late, there will be a notification on her phone to say, hey, we're not going to deliver at 8, we're going to do it 9:30, is that okay? Yes or no? Good. That sort of notification should also end up in the business world if there's something urgently happening that I need to be notified of. And it should be on the right device. We should also have things like clear actions, actually change the way applications look like so that a user can complete a task, even though it might be complicated technically. From a user perspective, maybe it's just an approval, whether it's a purchase or a vacation request or reviewing a document. I should be able to simply do it without having to wait and log on and start VPNs and get to my machine and all that stuff. We should be able to continue it fast and move on with more meaningful work. And in the end, also start using that AI so that we can have conversations with the workspace and maybe search for things a bit more intelligently than just on having to first find out whether there's a document application or a link that I need to get access to. The network part is another aspect of this. I talked about this. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but just the fact that the network inside outside is obsolete, in my view, because applications, data, and users are all outside anyway. So we need to have a different view where internet is just a natural extension of the network. In fact, it should maybe be the main network to be used. And then we can decrease security if we want on the inside, but we should have built-in security to deliver it already from the start. Analytics is that other part that the same way as we need to have people-based delivery of our IT, we also need to think about people-based analytics. The reason why is that if you now expose data applications to unmanaged devices, the traditional security mechanism around monitoring devices, gates, networks with agents installed on laptops and so forth is no longer cutting it, right? But what we do know is the person. We know Anastasia's behavior. She has a sales meeting or a marketing meeting, in Monday morning, and she normally starts these two apps and get to this updated document where she has some notes. Why don't we surface this in the morning for her? But all of a sudden, at Monday morning, at one time, she is starting to manipulate and change 20, 30 documents in 30 seconds. This is not a behavior that we think is normal, and we will challenge for that second authentication. We maybe block the access for 20 minutes, an hour, so IT can look into it, because that might not be Anastasia who does this. This might be an unknown, totally brand new, very advanced, malicious malware that is starting to encrypt files. So nobody knows about it, no detection will find it, but we will understand that the behavior is different, even though that happens on a device which we not manage, because we're looking at the person. And the same goes if she logs in the morning in one country, she can't be on another continent at lunchtime, and that in itself can also be a source for looking at this differently, and blocking access, for example. All right, so with this, let me go into a short demo. So this demo would be me working from home, from my Mac, right? My Mac is not part of the Citrix network. This is a demo environment, by the way, but just so you know. And I'm going to log in to get some work done, right? So I start a browser, right? And I go to this mywork.cloud.com, which is our, or demo cloud, our link. I will authenticate. In this case, it's just username and password because it is a demo environment. And I get my resources that I need. I have my application. I have my desktop, if I now prefer to work in a Windows desktop environment, and I have my files. Let's say I start an application. I have Salesforce. It's a SaaS application. In this case, I have favorites, so I can see only the ones I normally use. I click on it. Salesforce works reasonably well. There's no high security requirements. I'll launch it in another tab, single sign-in, and I get full Salesforce with all the activity, all the functionality and so forth that it has. Go back to the workspace. In this case, I need access to a file. I need access to a file in my home directory. So I go to my files, and in there I find a document. I don't download it. I just click on it because I just want to check whether this is the right one. In fact, this is the PowerPoint that I'm presenting. I can quickly have a view at it. I can even present it here. I can share it. I can ask for reviews. If I have the right requirements, I could download it, right? Another use case would be maybe that I have access also to other sources. I have OneDrive, Google Drive, OneDrive for Business, for example. So all of these different sources is single sign-on access. And in this case, I need to look at a PDF document. Yes, this is the one, and I can easily share, click edit it if I need to. This case is a Word document. Back to the issue where the application is needed. So I need full Word because I need to edit it. I double click on the file, and it actually launches Word, but it launches the Windows version in a secure container somewhere in the server room. But it looks like a local application. I have full access with Word, with full functionality. I can work on it. I can save it the standard way. It's just not on my desk, similar to on my MacBook, similar to the 9 o'clock news not being in your television. So when I'm done, there's nothing here, and I can move on. Now, if I'm a traditional person and I like my Windows desktop, I can also have my Windows desktop. I just don't have to carry the physical laptop with me. I can go into the menu of desktop, I can start the desktop, and it will get a full screen desktop. In this case, I'm running it in a window to show you guys what's happening, right? But this Windows desktop is now the one that you normally carry around with. It will always be close to the data center, and it will always have the latest and greatest updates by IT. Here is the PowerPoint again I'm using, the same PowerPoint, full functionality, I can work with it. If I need to go and edit the Word document, I can go to the Word document and I can edit the Word document the same way. Same as the Word application, this full desktop doesn't exist on my MacBook. It only exists in the server room, right? So when I'm done, I can disconnect from this and nothing will be on my MacBook. And this sort of solution, when people have had them already before the pandemic, this would no change to how people were working. Then we go into the menu of feeds where I been notified with something, for example, an expense report. I don't have to start the full expense report application. I just pull up the micro app of it, enough information to know, approve it, work done, move on to the next. I then have a notification that in an application, Salesforce, a contact had been added to me that I need to work because I'm a sales manager. I can then go in and verify that. There's a teammate starting in my team. I'm a director with sub-managers under, so there's a picture of the lady starting and been only notified by if it's in my direct organization, so I can quickly reach out to her or welcome her if I run into her at one location. There's a sales report that I'm subscribing to, so instead of having to start the full sales report tool, I just get the information I need, verify it, I can share it, I can edit whatever I need to do. And that was a few examples of how I can get quick tasks done in my workspace. Then, as I walk along the machine learning, we'll also have some actions available for me. And it will suggest, because I'm creating context all the time, it will surface this micro app. So instead of having to go to the full Salesforce GUI, it only the 5-6 entry points that I need to get the contact created is only surfaced. I type them in and I click OK, and that get added into Salesforce. And this looks the same whether I'm on mobile phone, the Mac, or whatever device I'm picking up. So this will hopefully quicker get that task done. And in fact, it might also be more secure, and it might also be secure from making mistakes because I only have the 4 or 5 boxes that I need to do instead of finding the correct spot. And as I'm using this workspace, it will add and understand my applications and put the most recent applications, my recent desktops, and my recent documents to surface them on the right side or whatever we place to put them so that I can click on them without even having to know in what container this was stored at. I can quickly look at the document and move on. And when I'm done, I'm just logging out and nothing is really still back on my MacBook. So with that, I just wanted to circle back on some of those 5 key, I think, technology enablers that will provide a great user experience. People-based, truly anywhere, without the need of a VPN and a different user experience and limitation. Try to work on creating some kind of digital workspace to get it easy and simple for people to use, yet secure and easy to manage for the business. We like to take the inspiration from a consumer-like application and experience that we have on that side, and start using the machine learning and AI capabilities that exist in many of these solutions, powered by cloud solutions, to make that workspace feel and act much more as a companion with more intelligent capabilities than just a number of disconnected icons on my desktop. So those were the 5 key enablers, and with that, thank you very much for watching. Thank you.
Great. Thank you for being here, and thanks for sharing that information with us. Please take a step here and let's have a little chat about this, because I don't want to drill down into some of the things that you said. And I would really like to invite the audience to submit any questions they have about this topic as well. Very welcome to still continue submitting questions and being active on the chat. So when we talk about some of the really big picture things, I'd like to go back to some of the big picture things you said at the beginning, because I thought it was quite interesting from a security perspective. We've already had a few people talking about security today, Dr. Rosner, etc. And you talked about that companies now, so much of what they use is outside of the firewall. And this whole concept of trying to keep things locked behind a firewall is probably a losing proposition for a company now.
Yeah.
And it's probably something that is actually going to hamper their employee experience. It's going to hamper their innovation. So, and you know, it's been really obvious that, you know, people come in and they do things better than you can do them. Google does search better than you could build it. You know, all of these kind of applications have come in and become specialists, right? So because everyone's going to want to use them, if there are any, you know, people in IT that are listening, what would you say to them about letting go of that firewall, you know, mentality that our security only exists if we have this firewall? What would you say?
Well, personally, I've witnessed this so many times that I truly believe in this, right? So in the old days, IT was authoritative when it comes to business, right? I go back to the way people were hired, positioned, salarized, and so forth. And networking was a very high authoritative part of IT.
Yep.
Essentially, you built networks, and then you try to figure out how application will run on them. And I'm so old that I was back in the days where we had Windows Active Directory or Novell, whatever we have for the user database. That has to be adjusted based on how the network was set up. My argue is the only reason we have networks is because applications need to run on them. And the only benefit of IT is when it hits the user. That's why it's called IT, information technology, right? So I'm very profound on this, that I think you have to challenge the status quo quite high up in the organization.
Okay.
Because people have built their careers, they have organizational IT departments, networking, data center, work application, and so forth.
Yeah.
And this needs to break, the silos needs to break. And I think that sometimes, and I've seen it where business is challenging IT. I've seen it in healthcare when iPads came out and Dropbox was new. They were saying, I want to use this stuff because I can treat patients, I can return time to patient care quicker. And IT did not have a solution.
Yeah.
So I truly believe that we have to look through this quite deeply, and it needs to go higher up. It can't be solved on the technology conversation, is my opinion.
And what I like about what you said there was, you know, let's go back and think about what IT stands for. It's information technology. The whole point of the technology is to help people get information.
Yes,
And you said something which I thought was also really great, which is, you know, previously, you know, people would have to gather themselves around the IT department, like physically. Literally, physically, back in the day. But now the IT department has to go where the people are.
Yes.
And I thought that was a really great takeaway for any of the people who are watching this to get that technology perspective, is that, you know, you are not going to be able to stop people moving away from the office. You are not going to stop them bringing their own device.
No.
You're not going to be able to control a lot of these things. And if we are an information technology department, shouldn't our role be to democratize that information and make that information as accessible as possible?
I mean, it's easy for me to sit here and say that it should be design thinking approach and outside in and do that. But of course, there's a big reliance on making sure that information is secure at rest, transit, and so forth. But I think that security parameter and the security thought has to be rethinked because of that. Because the alternative for some cases, Saab, would be that they would be out of business.
Yes.
Because it doesn't matter if they secure and out of business.
Yeah, because you said on the slide they're trying to balance agility and security, correct?
Well, that's not me. That's the CEO.
Them,
them say that and said it. But it's really true, right? You have to balance this, and you have to think of it in a different level. So I fully agree that we should have more people focusing on the user experience before they start building IT solutions. Yeah. And I think that's something.
And that people-centric approach leads me to the last of the 5, which is personalized.
Yeah.
So can I get from you a little bit of a sense of what you think this, I think you called it intelligent personalization?
Yes.
But I didn't really catch, I'm not a technical person.
No.
Trust me, it's a miracle this iPad's on. But what does intelligent personalization look like from the user perspective? What is it? What does it mean?
That's a good question. So here's an example. Most of us, when we book vacation, first we check with our wife, and then we check with our second boss, right? That's how you do it. Now, when we do, we go in and we request it in Workday, right? And that is logging on to the Workday and then finding out. Workday is a HR system, your HR system, right? You go in there, you request your vacation, and then you get approval. And when you're done, and only when you get the approval, you then add it into your calendar so you don't, so the other people would know. An intelligent workspace would help you. First off, it might be that you put the word vacation in your calendar for 5 days. And the system noticed that, listen, there's no vacation request available. So maybe they will surface a notification a couple of days before, a week before, whatever, to say, hey, listen, we saw that there's a vacation in your calendar and you haven't received it. Or vice versa, when you do request a vacation and once it's approved, it will automatically add a notification in your calendar. Those are simple tasks.
Yeah.
But we still have to do this cutting and pasting and working and logging on like we all do. So these small, mundane things we could simplify with some machine learning, and I call it then intelligently personalized based on your role and your activities. That would be
and of course it makes, when we think about the amount of information that search engines or Facebook or Instagram has about us to give us targeted advertising, it only makes sense that if we're giving away that much data,
why don't use it?
That doesn't help us. Why don't we do that at work in a safe and intelligent way, so that the systems that we're working with didn't work against us anymore. And that has been actually one of the big topics around AI over this conference, that AI will come in and solve more and more of the digital friction that's currently happening. So I think it's a fascinating area. We've got a question come in from Bjorn, which is, how do you define the digital workplace and what's in and what's out in the digital workplace?
Okay. So to me, there's like 3 stages a little bit. First one is just organize it. Just in a simple term. Now, I talked about that intelligence, but for many organizations, just have one place to go where you would, regardless of device and location, in a secure fashion, click on the app and start the app. So just organizing it, and every time you log in, it looks and feels the same, and your most recent application and document show up. The second part would be to speed up the 5 or 10 things, or even 3 things that you do every week that takes some time. Maybe there's a workflow where you need to approve a document or approve something in the application. But doing so, you have to start the application, and it only works kind of on the inside on your laptop. So when you're off somewhere and you forgot to bring your laptop, you shouldn't really have to have a big rucksack just to, if you buy something to work, just to get that approval. That part of that workflow can be presented as a micro app. So we simplify it back to the hotels and the bookings and the LinkedIn of the world with a green button to say, can you approve this? You flick it up, you're already authenticated, biometric, whatever it is, and it's enough to just approve that, and that process will continue. The third phase is then to use even further that machine learning and artificial intelligence to also start to recommend and follow up on some of the things that may be happening in your environment, whether it's a notification or a change, or just as simple as somebody starting new in the organization, in your direct organization. You'd like to be aware of that so you can meet and greet that person if you run into her, right? So just those are the 3 stages I think there should be. I'm not talking about re-engineering the complete application. We still need the full function. The Xerox machines still need to be there. So we're not in the business of re-engineering all application. We're looking for the specific chunk sizes that can be done. And then, of course, collaboration, and there are other pieces to this workspace which we are not contributing. Then you can use Teams or Zoom or GoToMeeting or whatever.
All the applications who are doing it.
So there are other parts of that workspace. We are mainly focusing on the application and the data, or that, if you like, the desktop, if people like to call it, and make that more flexible.
Look, I really appreciate all your insights, and even though it was a technical presentation, at the base of it, it's about people having a better experience, better employee experience, because at the base of it, the tools we work with make such a big part of our working life.
It does.
So it's super important. So thank you for being here. Really appreciate it.